Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I come on. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, having a nice discussion online with a lovely devotee who is very, very enthusiastic about Krishna consciousness. Very enthusiastic. And actually, Prabhupada, spiritual master, he said that's our qualification, is sincerity and to be enthusiastic. So this devotee is very sincere and very enthusiastic. So she's sure to make a lot of progress. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And is now also starting to read and hear from Prabhupada in his books. And becoming even more enthusiastic. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. So in the course of discussing about Krishna and about the path of devotion and about how to understand how to associate with other devotees and to avoid finding fault and try to help others whenever possible, and realize that Krishna is making all the arrangements to help us also. So it was a nice discussion. And then at some point, it just became really obvious to both of us that Krishna is Krishna. Krishna is Krishna. He's not different from his name. In that whatever situation we're in, a happy one, a miserable one, whatever the situation is, we always have access to Krishna because he's there in his name. Hare Krishna, roughly translated as energy of the Lord, O Lord, please engage me in your service. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Just by chanting Hare Krishna, engaging in devotional service. That is devotional service. Say, oh, engage me in your service, engage me in your service. And you're chanting Hare Krishna, you're engaging in service. You're serving Krishna. He's not different from his name. So if we're chanting his name, we're serving Krishna. It's too simple for 99.99% of the people on the planet. That Krishna is non-different from Krishna. God is non-different from his name. He's known in other cultures, spiritual cultures, by other names. He's known by his activities, through his devotees. He has different names. For the Vaishnav line coming from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu down through the disciplic succession, Krishna is the name, the most significant name, and the Maha Mantra is the sacrifice, is the worship in this line. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One of the saints in this line, I believe it's Rupa Goswami, about 500 years ago, at the time of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, incarnation of Krishna. He prays that if only he could have millions of ears to hear about Krishna and millions of tongues to chant Krishna's name. He's feeling very limited in this body. And even at that, we understand that Shankarshan, who has unlimited heads, he's millions of heads. This is not a material form, this is a spiritual form. And is glorifying Krishna with all of his unlimited mouths, unlimitedly, and never comes to the end, glorification. So it's a huge, incalculable ocean of ecstatic love of God. So I was thinking this morning, well, everyone's serving Krishna, everyone's serving God. What's the problem? Everyone's serving God, everyone's serving, everyone's part of God. They're either serving directly or indirectly. They're serving in knowledge or they don't know they're serving. So what's the problem? Everything's fine. And I was thinking, I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here chanting Hare Krishna. Everybody else is doing all the work. And so I'm like, well, I'm grateful that everyone's serving Krishna. I wouldn't have anything if they weren't. Everyone's serving Krishna. The gardeners are growing the vegetables, and the government is managing however they're managing. It's always a difficult job. I wouldn't even know how to speak if I hadn't gone to school as a child and teachers were teaching how to do mathematics and how to read, and my family taught me how to speak and use words. So I have a lot of debts to everybody. Everyone's doing service. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is, and there is a problem, is it's clearly explained in Mantra 10 of the Isopanisad, which reads, Anyad evahor vidyaya, nayad ahur avidyaya, iti shushumadhiranam yenas tat vichachakshare, which translates, this is one of the first books that our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, it's a small book, had printed, translated and had printed for mass distribution, because it's only 18 mantras and it would be a little easier to distribute for mass distribution than Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita. It was gigantic, like I don't know how many, like 1,000 pages or something. So this is smaller, little, the Isopanisad, and this is one of the first books. So this was the mantra 10. Anyad evahur vidyaya, nayad ahur avidyaya, iti shushumadhiranam yenas tat vichachakshare, which translates, the wise have explained that one result is obtained from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. So the problem is the cycle of birth and death. By everyone serving Krishna, but the result of serving in ignorance and being entangled in the illusory energy and remaining in ignorance is to have to go through the cycle of birth and death repeatedly. Birth, death, old age, disease. Birth, death, disease, old age. Birth, disease, old age, death. What's the best way to say that? It's the four things. Birth and death are sure, and in between is old age and disease. So, birth, death, old age, disease. Have to experience that. That's the result of serving God in ignorance, by being entangled in his illusory energy without consciousness of a loving relationship with the Lord, making decisions about how to live your life based on identifying with the temporary body and senses, and just becoming entangled life after life, birth after birth, and having to go through that. So that's the result of ignorance. The result derived from the culture of knowledge is different. When you understand how things work, you can make intelligent decisions to avoid pitfalls, to avoid entanglement, to head toward the light. If you're in the dark, you stumble around in the dark, you make all kinds of mistakes. You get all kinds of problems stumbling around in the dark. It's a very painful, fearful, miserable condition, stumbling around in the dark. And that's the nescience. The ignorance is being in the darkness. So the culture of knowledge brings light on the situation. What to do, what not to do. In talking with another devotee the other day, it's really wonderful discussing these kinds of things with devotees, because different lights come out. They have their perspective, and they're sharing how we're seeing things and experiencing things. So, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it came out about fear. And so we were discussing fear. So the devotee said, well, that's why you don't go through a red light, because you're afraid you might get hit by a car. Well, that's one level, but the other, that's kind of like in the ignorance level. Please forgive me, but that's kind of like the ignorance level, to act out of fear. But when there's knowledge, you understand, oh, it's a system to regulate the flow of traffic. And it's not out of fear, it's out of knowledge. The green light means to go, the red light means to stop. The fear factor is, unless you're driving in India, I don't know if they even have traffic lights. They all have horns on their vehicles. And they just, here I come, beep, 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 just get out of my way, here I come. It's a different kind of driving. But in the Western countries, there's a system that regulates the flow of traffic. So it's not like out of fear that you stop at the red light. You understand how it works. It's regulating the flow. Because you have knowledge of the system. Hare Krishna, Hare, and the experience is more peaceful, and you can understand how things work in the material world, just like understanding how the regulating the flow of traffic works. These are all sciences. Regulating electricity, understand how electricity works, voltage, amperage, wattage, how it's all related, what conducts electricity and what doesn't, how to channel the electricity using magnetic fields. It's a science of regulating that force, that energy. Also water. Water is also used for generators, and there are big dams, and the force of the water. The different ways, scientific ways to understand these flows of energy and how they work. So there's a science for understanding how the whole material world works. That there are 3 modes of activity. That's 4. 3 in the material world. The mode of goodness, the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance. And under the influence of those forces of energy, actually it's not impersonal energy, it's actually spiritual. These forces are actually spirit, and they are overseen by demigods. A little bit of a challenge for the material scientists. But these are not just like energies that came out of nowhere. They're actually spiritual in nature, a type of energy, and they're material, but they're overseen by intelligence who manage, just like the electricity at the light, the Department of Transportation or whatever department it is funded to make sure the lights are working. And then there's the electric source of the electric company, wherever they're getting the electricity, either solar or from hydroelectric or wind, wherever they're getting it from. Nuclear energy, they're channeling, and all these things are working together. And usually in everyday activity, people don't think about these things. Just like they go to the supermarket, it's in a package, they buy it, take it home, cook it, and eat it. Duh. Like they go to the meat section, and, do they want chicken wings or do they want ribs? It's in a package. They don't even think particularly where it came from. No, they don't even think. It's sometimes children, when they make that connection, especially children that are really attached to animals, like, say, a little child really loves little ducklings, or they have chickens or something, and when they make that connection, that what's in the supermarket is that body that's been killed, cut up, butchered, stuck in a plastic thing on a dish, no, this isn't going to work when they make the connection. But we don't make those connections on an everyday basis. We're moving so fast. We don't make those connections. So the pace of modern society doesn't allow for actually going deeper into how things really work. And so there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of entanglement. And fear, lust, anger, and greed, they run parallel in the heart. There's a lot of lust, there's anger, there's greed, and the whole thing is a very fearful situation. It's all fear-based. Because of what? A different result is obtained from the culture of nations. So everyone is part of God. We're all part of God. He's got the whole world in his hand. He's got the itty bitty baby in his, the whole world. We're all, the whole everything is coming from Krishna. And we're inside Krishna. And Krishna is inside us. That's one of the great mysteries of what kind of predicament we're in. So when we get knowledge of how things work, then the fear factor goes away. And then there's room for love of God. See, when there's fear, if you fear someone, it's really the full range of love isn't accessible, because the primary emotion is fear. But when you understand how things work, you have access to information about the personality of God, and you have access to how things work in the world. Just like when it's green you go, when it's red you stop. Where's the fear? There's no fear. But you keep your eyes open, because there may be some idiot out there who isn't paying attention, is on his cell phone or something. So, I mean, yeah, you do keep, one eye open. Krishna. But basically, when you understand how things work, then you can begin to approach God in love. Begin to experience a loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna. So that's what we get from this verse. The wise have explained, one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that is knowing how things work, fear factor diminished, being free from fear, and having knowledge, then can begin to enjoy a loving relationship with God. When that knowledge, the culture of knowledge, that's actual knowledge, because Krishna says by all the Vedas, scriptures, I am to be known. So, Hare Krishna. And that is a different result that's obtained from the culture of nations. Let's look at what we have in the purport here. Move this over here so I can see it. Hare Krishna. What Prabhupada is telling us, he's giving some very detailed how-to here. It's a how-to. It's not like just philosophical acceptance. He's giving some how-to here. Prabhupada's purport. As advised in chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, one should culture knowledge in the following way. Oh, wait a minute. I gotta scroll down here. Sorry for the... Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I lost it. Come back. Where'd it go? Oh, for goodness sake. Hare Krishna. Alright, I have to try something else here. Technology. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Okay, it's mantra 10. Let's go back here. Krishna. Okay, we're good. Now that we see how things work, we don't have to be angry and frustrated. The wise have explained one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. Prabhupada's purport. As advised in chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, 13, 8 through 12, one should culture knowledge in the following way. 1. One should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. 2. One should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. There's a lot of shoulds here. 3. One should not become a source of anxiety to others by the action of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. 4. One should learn forbearance even in the face of provocation from others. 5. One should learn to avoid duplicity in his dealings with others. 6. One should search out a bona fide spiritual master who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization, and one must submit himself to such a spiritual master, render him service, and ask relevant questions. Who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization. Submit to such a spiritual master, render service, and ask relevant questions. 7. In order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regulative principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. So, regulative principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures, it's not necessarily the 4 basic regulative principles of avoiding meat, fish, and eggs, no intoxication, no gambling, and no illicit sexual connections. That's the regulative principles of human life. They're saying here one must follow the regulative principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. So there's more. There's living in a holy place, studying the Bhagavatam. There's all kinds of regulative principles, rising early, not overeating. There's all kinds of regulative principles. Number 8, one must be fixed in the tenets of revealed scriptures. They have to accept the truths in the revealed scriptures. One should completely refrain from practices which are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. 10. One should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. 11. One should not falsely identify himself with the gross material body, nor should one consider those who are related to his body to be his own. So how do you do that? Like, they were produced out of my body, right? The mother, she carried the embryo in the womb, the father planted the seed. How can you consider them not my own? By seeing family relations in terms of service to Krishna. That's how that's done. Hare Krishna. 12. One should always remember that as long as he has a material body, he must face the miseries of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. Birth, old age, disease, and death. Okay, that's a good way to, when you're going to say those four, that's a good way to say them in order. Birth, old age, disease, and death. There is no use in making plans to get rid of these miseries of the material body. The best course is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity. 13. One should not be attached to more than the necessities of life required for spiritual advancement. 14. One should not be more attached to wife, children, and home than the revealed scriptures ordain. 15. One should not be happy or distressed over desirables and undesirables, knowing that such feelings are created by the mind. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Happiness and distress, that's discussed in the Gita, should remain steady in happiness and distress. Desirables and undesirables. That's the mind is always accepting and rejecting. But the accepting and rejecting that the mind does without intelligence is based on bodily considerations. This tastes good, that doesn't taste good. It's based on the body and the senses. So, Hare Krishna. 16. One should become an unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna and serve him with rapt attention. Yeah, this tastes good, that doesn't taste good. You can't deny it. It tastes good, it doesn't taste good. But not to be disturbed by it, understanding it's just the mind calculating. Like sometimes medicine doesn't taste very good. But you don't reject it because it's medicine, some kind of herbal medicine to clear up congestion or something like that. So you don't reject. Now a child a lot of times won't take medicine if it doesn't taste good. So it has to have like a candy coating on it or something. 17. One should develop a liking for residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere, favorable for spiritual culture. And one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. 18. One should become a scientist or philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the death of the body. Study how things work. Know what's going on. You become a scientist. Like the scientists, they study electricity, they study nuclear energy. They want to know how things work so they can harness it and use it. Well, become a scientist or philosopher and do research into spiritual knowledge. Because that's permanent. Material knowledge ends with the death of the body. These 18 items combine to form a gradual process by which real knowledge can be developed. Except for these, all other methods are considered to be in the category of nescience. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great acharya, maintained that all forms of material knowledge are merely external features of the illusory energy, and that by culturing them, one becomes no better than an ass. The same principle is found here in Sri Isopanisad. By advancement of material knowledge, modern man is simply being converted into an ass. Some materialistic politicians in spiritual guise decry the present system of civilization as satanic. But unfortunately, they do not care about the culture of real knowledge, as it is described in the Bhagavad Gita. Thus, they cannot change the satanic situation. Materialistic politicians in spiritual guise decry the present system of civilization as satanic. They don't give any solution. They don't care about real knowledge, real spiritual knowledge. They just point out this is no good. They cannot change the satanic situation. This may also be a hidden referral to Gandhi, who Prabhupada, he thought everyone, he was so spiritual, but actually he was a politician in a spiritual guise, and he really couldn't change anything. In the modern society, even a boy thinks himself self-sufficient and pays no respect to elderly men. Due to the wrong type of education being imparted in our universities, boys all over the world are giving their elders headaches. Thus, Sri Isopanisad very strongly warns that the culture of nescience is different from that of knowledge. The universities are, so to speak, centers of nescience only. As Prabhupada asked that question, he says, where is the department in the university to study the difference between spirit and matter? Where's that department in the university? If you don't have that department, all of your study is simply nescience, because you don't know the difference between spirit and matter. If you're only studying matter, it's nescience. So he asks that question, he says, where's the department to study the difference between spirit and matter? Where is it? The universities are, so to speak, cultures of nescience only. Consequently, scientists are busy discovering lethal weapons to wipe out the existence of other countries. University students today are not given instructions in the regulative principles of brahmachari, celibate student life, nor do they have any faith in any scriptural injunctions. Religious principles are taught for the sake of name and fame only, and not for the sake of practical action. Thus, there is animosity not only in society and political fields, but in the field of religion as well. Religious principles are taught for the sake of name and fame only, and not for the sake of practical action. Not all religious communities are victimized by this to the nth degree. There are other cultures that are teaching practical action, but they're very few and very far between. Nationalism has developed in different parts of the world due to the cultivation of nescience by the general people. No one considers that this tiny earth is just a lump of matter floating in immeasurable space along with other lumps. Yeah, they're absorbed in this nationalism. It's all in all. You know, it's like, my country is everything. And although there is information available that's just a lump in space along with other lumps, when they're absorbed in this nationalism thing, it doesn't enter into it. It's like, so what? This is here and now, and it's my country, and blah, blah. In comparison to the vastness of space, these material lumps are like dust particles in the air. Because God has kindly made these lumps of matter complete in themselves, they are perfectly equipped with all necessities for floating in space. The drivers of our spaceships may be very proud of their achievements, but they do not consider the supreme driver of these greater, more gigantic spaceships called planets. There are innumerable suns and innumerable planetary systems also. As infinitesimal parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, we small creatures are trying to dominate these unlimited planets. Thus we take repeated birth and death and are generally frustrated by old age and disease. Thus we take repeated birth and death and are generally frustrated by old age and disease. The span of human life is scheduled for about 100 years, although it is gradually decreasing to 20 or 30 years. That's described in the Bhagavatam, that the quality of life on the planet will degrade to such a degree that if someone lives to be 25 years old, they'll be considered a very old age, because it'd be so difficult to maintain the body. Already we see the air's contamination problems, the waters, the food, it's so many, so that it's going to get worse. Not right away. There's a little bit of a reprieve here for several thousand years because of this focus on glorifying God and taking practical actions to serve. There's a little bit of a reprieve, but it does end, and then after a while it degrades to this condition. 25 years, ripe old age. Thanks to the culture of nations, befooled men have created their own nations within these planets in order to grasp sense enjoyment more effectively for these few years. Such foolish people draw up various plans to render national demarcations perfectly, a task that is totally impossible. Yeah, I mean, where's the line on the ground that says, this is this country and that's that country? It's all on, they're drawing up these maps, but they can't draw them up perfectly, and then they fight. Yet for this purpose, each and every nation has become a source of anxiety for others. More than 50% of a nation's energy is devoted to defense measures and thus spoiled. No one cares for the cultivation of real knowledge, yet people are falsely proud of being advanced in both material and spiritual knowledge. Sri Isopanisad warns us of this faulty type of education, and the Bhagavad Gita gives instructions as to the development of real knowledge. This mantra states that the instructions of vidya, knowledge, must be acquired from a dhira. A dhira is one who is not disturbed by material illusion. No one can be undisturbed unless he is perfectly spiritually realized, at which time one neither hankers nor laments for anything. A dhira realizes that the material body and mind he has acquired by chance through material association are but foreign elements. Therefore he simply makes the best use of a bad bargain. So I have to hear spiritual knowledge from a dhira, someone who not disturbed by the material energy, not disturbed by illusion. And a person can't be like that unless he's perfectly spiritually realized. And he neither hankers nor laments for anything. He realizes the material body and the mind have been acquired by chance through material association and are foreign elements. Chance is another way to understand karma here. Karma. Therefore, he simply makes the best use of a bad bargain. The material body and mind are bad bargains for the spiritual living entity. Living entity has factual functions in the living spiritual world, But this material world is dead. As long as the living spiritual sparks manipulate the dead lumps of matter, the dead world appears to be a living world. So this body is actually dead, but I'm in it and I'm using it so it looks like it's alive. But it's actually dead. And when I leave this body, it will become obvious this body never was alive. Just like I'm wearing this wrap here, it's called a chadar. It's got the holy name on it in Sanskrit. And it looks like it has life, you know. Look at it, it's moving around, and it's because I'm inside of it. But if I take it off and I throw it on the floor, it just sits there, it doesn't do anything. So this body is like that. But I'm identifying with it. I'm thinking it's alive. But it's not. It's already dead. The body is dead. It's dead matter. And as you get older, you realize that more and more. How dead this body really is. Because it only has a certain amount of time where it will be functional. Here, Prabhupada was saying about 100 years at the most. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Ah, Krishna. Actually, it is the living souls, the parts and parcels of the Supreme Living Being who move the world. The Dhiras have come to know all these facts by hearing them from superior authorities and have realized this knowledge by following the regulative principles. Regulative principles of freedom. To follow the regulative principles, one must take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. Those are the regulative principles enjoined in the scriptures. The transcendental message and regulative principle come down from the spiritual master to the disciple. Such knowledge does not come in the hazardous way of nascent education. One becomes a dhira only by submissively hearing from a bona fide spiritual master. Arjuna, for example, became a dhira by submissively hearing from Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead himself. Thus, the perfect disciple must be like Arjuna, and the spiritual master must be as good as the Lord himself. This is the process of learning vidya, knowledge, from the dhira, the undisturbed. So people, Prabhupada says, I'm in my books. So people who are reading and hearing from Prabhupada in his books, he said, I'm in my books. They're fulfilling this instruction which Prabhupada is giving. One can become a dhira only by submissively hearing from a bona fide spiritual master. And Prabhupada is in his books. And then Krishna sends help, because we have many spiritual masters. We don't just have necessarily one spiritual master, although Krishna is the spiritual master of everyone. But different people, by Krishna's arrangement, are empowered by Krishna to help others in different ways. So Krishna makes those arrangements. So by reading and hearing from Prabhupada in his books, Hare Krishna, that's safe. And then everything else is Krishna's arrangement to help. So taking Prabhupada in his books, Hare Krishna. And then Krishna sends help. Sends Shiksha Guru, he sends Pravatana Daksha Guru, he sends, and then also this Chechi Guru was in the heart. There's lots of gurus. Hare Krishna. An adhira, one who has not undergone the training of a dhira, cannot be an instructive leader. Modern politicians who pose themselves as dhiras are actually adhiras, and one cannot expect perfect knowledge from them. They are simply busy seeing to their own remuneration in dollars and cents. How, then, can they lead the mass of people to the right path of self-realization? Thus, one must hear submissively from a dhira in order to attain actual education. And the verse again. Anyad evahor vidyaya nayadahara vidyaya iti shushrumadhiranam yenas tattva chachakshari. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of essence. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.